event.
Good evening and welcome to this special program. My name is Jesse Rogers. Now, just yesterday, Kenya joined the rest of the African continent in marking the annual anti-corruption call for reflection on the progress in the fight against corruption. In Kenya, numerous strides have been made in the fight against corruption. Case in point, the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act 2003 that has been a crucial pillar in the fight against this vice. But it's worth noting that there are gaps in our existing laws that have been a major drawback in the fight. Hence this need to fix the challenges to ensure that the corrupt are effectively held to account. Now tonight, in the backdrop of the African Anti-Corruption Day, we reflect on the journey thus far, taking stock of the challenges, the wins, and what policy and legislative actions are being undertaken to ensure victory in the fight against this scourge. Speaking of legislative actions, there are currently two proposed bills in the National Assembly that have been touted as a dilution to the graft law. This will form a major part of our discussion tonight with my panelists, who I'll be introducing shortly. First things first, we want to break down the contentious proposed laws, and a little bit later on, I'll get to introduce my panelists. But let me introduce my panelists first. I'll first start with the lady on my direct left. She is Dr. Constance Gekonyo, a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi Faculty of Law. And just a brief introduction to some of her accomplishments. She has conducted extensive studies in maritime law, anti-corruption and anti-money laundering laws. Equally published articles in the African Journal of International and Comparative Law. As I mentioned, she's definitely a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi Faculty of Law and an accomplished advocate of the High Court of Kenya. That's one of the esteemed panelists I'll be hosting tonight. The other gentleman is equally of quite higher gravitas. Allow me to introduce him. He is Ben Murray, the Deputy Director of Legal Services at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Equally an advocate of the High Court with 18 years experience at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission in asset recovery and regional leadership. In 2020, he was awarded the Order of the Grand Warrior. He has a master's degree in law, but key among some of his accomplishments, 18 years he has specialized in asset recovery and regional leadership at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. So those are the two panelists who will be taking us through some of the notable challenges we faced in the fight against corruption. And as I hinted a little bit earlier, currently there are two laws in Parliament. If those proposals actually sail through, according to some of those who are well versed in this particular conversation or this topic, they mention it might be taking us back in terms of the steps we've taken in the fight against corruption. So we'll have a holistic conversation in terms of what exactly these laws are proposing, whether they are a double-edged sword, and what exactly we need to change, if any, in terms of the proposals. So gentlemen and lady, karibu sana Daktari, karibu sana Eric. It's a pleasure to have you with us right here. And I must say, we're having this conversation in the backdrop of the African Anti-Corruption Day, so quite timely, I must say. Allow us to begin with what is a contentious law. It has been touted that it might dilute the efforts around the Anti-Corruption and Economic Recovery Act 2003, and we just want to get the nitty-gritty details of what exactly is being proposed in these two bills. And perhaps we'll start with one that is proposed by the Homa Bay Member of Parliament, Peter Kaluma, who is proposing purging of Section 64 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Recovery Act, enacted in 2003, and that particular section, Section 64, actually bars corruption convicts from assuming office, public office. Now, according to the Homa Bay Member of Parliament, he believes that these individuals have served their time, hence they are recovered. You know, they have been changed in terms of serving their time, and hence perhaps why he's pushing this particular law. So what exactly is contentious about it? I'll start with you, Daktari, briefly, in terms of that particular law seeking to purge Section 64 of the ACECA 2003 law. What exactly is contentious about it from your understanding?
Thank you for the question. It is contentious because if you allow these people to hold public office, then what is the point of having the Chapter 6 in the Constitution? Mm-hmm. Because it means it was there to decorate. We just put it in writing, but the implementation is actually not there. We are giving them a free hand. I liken this when we talk about asset recovery. One of the reasons why asset recovery was put in place is because it was felt those who are engaging in economic crimes eventually, for example, serve their jail term and then get out, and the money that they made illegally is there waiting for them. So in the same way, if you permit these people to hold office, you're actually handing them a silver platter and telling them, just go on with life as if nothing happened. Mm-hmm. And what are you telling the rest of the public? That it's okay, go ahead, integrity is not important. You will just take you to court. Once you've gone through the court process, served your term, life goes back to normal. That for me is why it is contentious. Okay,
interesting. Murray, as you come in, I mean, your observation in terms of these proposed provisions and what exactly it might have as an effect in terms of the fight against corruption.
So thank you, Jesse. Thank you for having me. The bill is contentious. It is also surprising given the profile of the MP proposing it, a learned friend, a lawyer. He has also been very supportive in the fight against corruption. He has been supportive in proposing legislation that will strengthen the fight. Mm-hmm. So this legislation comes as a surprise because, ethical norms, it's like a pyramid. There are those ethical breaches which are just, minor. You maybe you just get away with a verbal warning. Then there are those that graduate into maybe disciplinary action. And finally, at the apex, there are those grave offenses, they are grave misconduct, breaches of rules that amount to either corruption or economic crimes, or maybe other serious crimes. So what the Honorable MP is proposing is that, okay, he has no problem with the application of Chapter 6 as regards all the other fairly minor offenses, fairly minor ethical breaches. But when it comes to the top, those who go through a rigorous process of prosecution and conviction, so there's no chance that this person has been unfairly targeted. So what he's proposing that those ones do not get the application of Chapter 6, which is really unfortunate, because if the others get to suffer Chapter 6, then what of those convicted of Corruption and Economic Crimes Act? Corruption and economic crimes. So it doesn't make sense. It will make the citizen to not have confidence in the laws, okay. Because what is the point of letting those who have suffered minor breaches to maybe get punished, leave their jobs? You know the story about the former Chief Justice, having had an altercation with a security officer and a pinch of the nose allegedly, and was to the effect that you should know people. And she lost a high job. Now, a person convicted of corruption, having gone through the rigorous process, gets to just possibly pay a fine. You've noticed judicial trends, sentencing trends. Normally, it's the sentence applicable under Section 48 is, number one, a sentence of is it 1 year? No, sorry, it's a fine of 1 million shillings or a custodial sentence under Part A. Under Part B, it is double the loss or double the benefit or both. So you have a situation here where somebody is charged with corruption. He steps aside under Section 62. He steps aside. He is on half pay. Goes through the process. You know his job is not filled because he's on half pay. So there's likelihood that if he's acquitted, he goes back to his job and he gets back his full salary. Okay. So once a conviction happens, most likely it's a monetary fine. And you've seen Waluke, you've seen the Rio scandal, Olympic scandal. There have been monetary fines. So supposing this person had his own cartel, who are still supportive, they pay him, they pay the fine. What happens? He goes back to work tomorrow. The fine is paid, the conviction is in the morning, in the afternoon the fine is paid. Tomorrow morning at 8, Sambilius Bui is on duty. Going after those people who testified against him. Does it make sense? Retaliation galore happens in...
So that's how corruption fights back in one way or the other.
Absolutely.
So in terms of where the Homa Bay Member of Parliament is coming from, and even as we talk about this, we'd like those graphics we had prepared just to go on the screen so we can simply break down some of the proposed changes in the anti-corruption law. And as you can see there, Section 64 bars corruption and economic crimes convicts from holding public office. And the proposal by the Homa Bay Member of Parliament seeks to repeal the legal provisions that prohibit corruption convicts from appointment to public office. So, Daktari, in essence, we're saying if you're charged and convicted of economic crimes as the law stands, you're not eligible to hold public office, or perhaps at least for some time. When this, or if this law changes, we might have that reversed. And you've just mentioned the argument in terms of why it actually is contentious. But I mentioned perhaps where the Honourable Member of Parliament is coming from, that perhaps these convicts have been rehabilitated within that particular point in time. Does that hold any water, perhaps, in terms of that argument legally?
They may have been rehabilitated and are remorseful for their actions, but should crime pay? Because in essence, by allowing you to hold public office, maybe you paid the fine, you still have part of this money and can use it to draw influence. So should we let you benefit from the crime you committed? It should pinch a little bit more. It should not just about paying the fine or serving the custodial sentence. There should be something else that even speaks to the rest of society that indeed this person did something wrong. Let it be an example to others. I work in an educational institution, so are we telling the young people out there that it's okay to commit a crime, you pay a fine, and life goes on? Thereafter, you're the leader of tomorrow, telling students and the young people, you know, go on with business. They won't forget your past. They look to it and they use that as an inspiration, actually, that crime pays. So long as, for example, maybe I don't get caught, or if I get caught, make sure I hire a good lawyer. Although I'm convicted, pay my fine and I'm free. So for me, the repercussions, as Mr. Murray is saying, are far-reaching. It's not just about that person. Okay. The repercussions flow to the rest of society as well. And
Mr. Murray, as you come in, let's talk about the purpose of this particular provision.
To what Dr. has just answered? Really, that has there been time to get rehabilitation? Because I give the scenario of monetary fine. In the afternoon, the fine is paid. Tomorrow morning, he's in the office. Has there been time to reflect as to what has happened, to seek repentance, seek rehabilitation, ask for forgiveness for his sins. The 10-year period that the suspension is supposed to take place, the prohibition from holding position, is supposed to give him time to reflect what he has done, seek forgiveness, and then when the public sees that he's really reformed, then he can be given a second chance. So, really, going back immediately is not right, and I'm going to add that it's not constitutional. And I wanted to read for you the provisions of Article 73. 73 2C. Okay? Responsibilities of leadership. The guiding principles of leadership and integrity include, okay, I'm going to skip and go to C straight away. Selfless service based solely on public interest, demonstrated by honesty in the execution of public duties. Okay, so I'll leave at that. So demonstrated by honesty in the execution of public duties. So there will be a record to look at before you are employed. So what is his record? His record is a conviction. So to employ him straight away would be a direct affront to Article 73 2C. It's unconstitutional.
That makes sense. And I'm just trying to figure out where the learned friend, the member of parliament, unfortunately is not here to speak, but in terms of that 10-year period, is it in any way an infringement into the rights of this particular rehabilitated convict in one way or the other, in terms of not being, available, not being in a position to hold public office? Is it an infringement in their rights in any way?
Why would it be an infringement on their rights? You committed an offense, you were taken through a proper legal process, and at the end found guilty. Yeah. And you're now suffering the consequences of your actions after a legitimate process having taken place. Actually, 10 years is a very short period of time, if you ask me. Time moves very fast. And 10 years also will give time for the public to see whether you're remorseful. Or are you continuing with other underhand deals despite this particular conviction? So it gives time for the public to actually evaluate you and see whether indeed you have changed or not, so that they're able to determine whether you should hold a public office or not. For example, they may choose to vote you or not as a member of parliament for their area.
Okay, interesting. And as we finalize on this, Murray, I mean, it's really interesting that this is coming from a learned friend. Yes. So does it hold any water? Is there any substantive claim that has perhaps brought this proposal into light, and thus the need to change the anti-corruption laws that were enacted back in 2003 from where you sit?
There is absolutely no reason to amend Section 64.
Yeah.
You see, public service, okay? It's not a price. It's not a price that you win, and there is nothing you lose in not being in public service if you are there for the right reasons, for the constitutional reasons, which is self-service, selfless service, just for the good of public interest. It's an opportunity to. It's a responsibility to serve, your fellow human beings. Mm-hmm. So, unless of course you are there for corrupt dealings, so of course you lose your corrupt dealings. But if you are there to serve people, then there's nothing you have lost. You're just being told, okay, if you want to continue serving us, take a break. Okay, and there's one thing else that is going to be missed out by deleting Section 64. Mm-hmm. There's a part of Section 64 that says that the Commission shall publish every year list of convicted persons. Okay? So, like Justice Ringera said yesterday during the commemoration, that provides an opportunity to, provides a list of shame so that you deter corruption. You tell the public, these are the shameless people engaging in corruption. So again, in this proposed amendment, that will go, which is not good for the fight against corruption.
Okay.
And then, if I may add, on the issue of infringement of rights, remember, rights are not absolute. Even in the Constitution, the rights are not
right?
Absolutely. They have limitations to those rights. And so being convicted through a legitimate process and then having to suffer the consequences, then that to me would be a valid limitation to infringe on your rights.
Okay, this is interesting. And that's just one of the proposed amendments to the law, the anti-corruption law that is currently on the floor of the House. I just want us to go through the other contentious proposal and just get your views on it. It has been fronted by the Mbeere North Member of Parliament, Geoffrey Ruku, and it proposes amendment to sections 45(2)(b) and (c) of the anti-corruption law. It seeks to substitute criminal prosecution for corruption offenses arising from procurement flaws with administrative ones. So this is a little bit interesting because we're coming from a point, ladies and gentlemen, where the corruption issue, the corruption purge we have in the country, and we've seen reports around this, that 80% of it is related to procurement flaws here and there. So when we have a member of parliament targeting a certain section that touches on, something that highlights the inconsistencies perhaps in, fighting corruption, what message does it pass? Dr. Kikonyo, I'll start with you. In terms of that second bill, what do you think it seeks to do and what are its provisions? Just break it down for us, for our viewers, and equally the negative effect it might have in terms of dilution of the law as it is right now.
In a very simple way,
Yeah.
that particular law will make it very easy for anyone who wants to engage in procurement irregularities to do so. Because when you take away the offense of not engaging in project planning, it means when undertaking a project, you're creating opportunities for loopholes for people to just, as at whim, engage in a particular project, which means the cost of the project can skyrocket anytime. Accountability and transparency will not be implemented. So that means we as the citizens will suffer. And actually we should really be speaking out loudly against that. Because it means when you take a project, this whole issue of planning for the project, from the issue of cost to the issue of execution, to the issue of seeing whether the project has been fulfilled appropriately, that offense will be taken away. So no one can, we cannot charge those who are involved in irregular acts involving that process. So we as the public, we are taxed, our money is used for public projects, but no one, if anything goes wrong, can be held accountable for what has gone wrong. So to me, that is a serious problem.
Okay, this is definitely, well, the consequences might be profound as it is. And as you come in, Murray, talk to us about this particular proposal, the negative effect it might have, and as the law is right now, does it work to the advantage in terms of fighting the corruption-related, the corruption issues that we have in terms of procurement? Yeah.
Just say, they've been focused on procurement. I've listened to discussions over the past 2 or 3 weeks when this bill became live for discussion.
Yeah.
And there's been focus on procurement. And I think that is proper because procurement is a serious issue. But there's something lost in that discussion. The bill seeks far more damaging amendments to Section 45. And Section 45 is the only section that deals with economic crimes. Economic crimes, as Justice Ringera explained to us yesterday, was the product of protracted discussions with Parliament before they came up with it, with the various committees, the PAC and PIC. Eventually, they agreed to have Section 45 in ASECA, in the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act. This is an act, this is a section that targets to preserve public property public revenue, after the scourge of Goldenberg, you remember?
Yeah.
After the scourge of Anglo-leasing, where public coffers are looted and we end up suffering, the cost of living goes up. So we should protect Section 45 with all we can. Now, this is what is missed out in this discussion.
Okay.
I'll read for you what is missed. Section 45 to 2B, an officer or person whose functions concern the administration, custody, management, receipt, or use of part of public revenue or property is guilty of an offense if the person, and I'm going to be straight away, willfully or carelessly fails to comply with any law or applicable procedures and guidelines relating to procurement, that is where the focus has been, allocation, or sale or disposal of property. Remember, disposal of property is still a big issue. Remember the way we dispose of motor vehicles, very good motor vehicles, very good lose and move property. How we dispose of fixed properties, immovable property. Remember the scandal about Grand Regency Hotel? And there's now talk of also privatization of parastatals.
Yeah.
So that will be key. This law will be key. Tendering of contracts, management of funds, or incurring of expenditure. So if you mismanage all that willfully or carelessly, you will not be punished. So what will be the effect? A lot of loss of public revenue. C, also missed out, engages in a project without prior planning. And you have seen this. You walk around in our counties, you walk around in Nairobi, you see abandoned projects. Okay, the latest that will be abandoned, I'm told, will be the Green Park terminus in Nairobi, after spending a lot of money. You go to counties, you find stadiums which a lot of money have been pumped, and yet they are still, in ruins. It looks like in ruins. So these are projects that are engaged in without prior planning. No budget, maybe there was little money, no budgetary approval, no feasibility study, no public participation. And then along the way, the money is over, the contractor goes to court or goes to arbitration, usually arbitration. He's paid for delayed payments, interest, penalties, and the government or the county government just hemorrhages public funds. It's very unfortunate. There's a lot that we're losing out.
And we'll come back right after this short break in terms of more explanation in terms of what exactly this provision might do in terms of negating the fight against corruption, because you've definitely broken it down. And perhaps this is one of the questions I'll pose, because we've heard of, substitute criminal prosecution for corruption offenses with administrative sanctions. What exactly do they mean by administrative sanctions? Will this have a far-reaching effect as compared, to criminal prosecution in terms of this corruption-related offenses arising from procurement flaws? So do stay with us. This conversation continues in just but a few as we continue evaluating those two proposals in terms of changing the anti-corruption law as it is. As you've just heard right now, it might have far-reaching consequences in terms of diluting the law. But to what effect? Stay with us. We'll be back with that.